Hey, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Booth, Skylines podcast. This is our second edition. I'm very happy to be joined by two great Skyliners, two friends of mine, as well as two amazing people, Erin Clute and Roger Johnsen. I'd love for them to introduce themselves. Roger, you want to go first?
Roger Johnsen, Business Development Director here at Skyline. I've been in events for 20 years.
Hi.
Excellent.
I'm Erin Clute. I've been with Skyline since 2012. I actually entered this industry in a project management role, quickly moving into an exhibit consultant role. And my current title as managing director allows me to work with a multitude of our senior account executives and account development directors across the network. So I get to work with a various array of clients, and I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Good to see you. And I'm Brian Lanning. I'm your host. I am a senior managing director here at Skyline. I get involved in strategic conversations with clients. I've been with Skyline since 2005, and I've been in the industry since 1997. So collectively, between the three of us, we have quite a few years of industry experience that we're going to be relying on during this conversation here today. And today's topic is we're going to be talking rentals. Now, in this day and age, rentals seem to be just about everywhere. Like everyone knows you can rent your house or your apartment, or you go away and you can rent a car. You know, those are pretty basic. But in doing some of the research, I found that you can actually rent baby gear. You can rent sporting equipment. My stepdaughter actually rented a dress for her prom, and this was new. I didn't know that you could rent out your pool, which seems kind of gross. Like, I don't know if I would actually do that. Looking back, like rentals seem to be kind of a new phenomenon, but in the research I was doing, they actually started out at the Great Exhibition in London in 1851. Which I found surprising. They were just simple backdrops. There were 10,000 exhibitors that set up 8 miles of tables. 8 miles of tables. And that exhibition went on for 6 months. So imagine the extended rental fees that must have been had for those exhibits, for an exhibit. Yeah, that went on for 8 months. So let's just dive right in when we start talking about rental exhibits on their own. Now, there's a lot of stigma around renting exhibits. So when we start talking about some of the disadvantages, I guess, or some of the stigma around rental exhibits, there's a lot out there in terms of what you get for your dollar and what kind of designs you could get. One of the biggest things that I guess has always been being in the industry as long as I have is when walking the show floor, you're always able to pick out what is a general contractor rental exhibit, right? Like those are really easy to spot because they're very plain. More than likely the graphics are vinyl applied to a panel system that slides into channels. It's a very innocuous system. And those are the kind of things that don't really lend themselves to create excitement on the show floor. Any other things that you guys can think of when it comes to rentals that kind of have that stigma around them, and some of it rightly so, that kind of people are kind of shy away from, or at least kind of makes rental a dirty word, or kind of something they don't want to think about in terms of when it comes to exhibiting?
Well, I think for me, as you were saying, you're walking around and you could point out what a rental exhibit is. We can talk about what that is. It's wrinkled graphics, blurry graphics, like fit, finish, and quality, right? Like those are generally
poor color treatments, right? Yeah. Poor color treatments.
But I think for me, like, that's okay. Like somehow as a rental, like the stigma is, well, we got to rent it and you're going to get what you get. And, I think that has changed over time, right? Like, you can see some kind of old school, like really shoddy stuff out there, but I think the rental game is, stepping up for sure.
I do. Yeah.
Almost definitely. Like
Yeah.
I always think boring. You can't make it unique. It's not interesting. The word kit, the dirty word kit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that that's when people think I am strapped budgetarily. I guess I'm gonna have to do rental. It's like a settling. And and
Right.
I think that that's really interesting. It's something I know that that's part of what the three of us are talking about today is combating that stigma, because there is a different side to rental that we really need to kind of squash, that idea of boring kit, low quality settling.
No, no doubt about it. And I think coming from, as old as I am in the industry, like the kits used to be the hot thing. Like you would get an actual show book, right? They would deliver like the phone book, and you would be able to peel through, and you would get to a whole section of actual, you'd go, here's the 10-foot exhibits, here's the 10 by 20 exhibits, and you would flip through, and people would go, yep, I want to order this one. And then you would go through and you'd get the pre packaged graphics that you could get, and you'd send in your logos, and your name would go over the top, and it'd be very simplistic, right? And I think the lack of flexibility was really what challenged the rental. What really forced people into buying exhibits was that I don't want to look like everybody else. My brand doesn't look like everybody else. My product doesn't look like everybody else. But yet when I'm going, and because maybe I don't have the marketing dollars that some of the larger companies have, I'm kind of being forced to go this route that I have to kind of pick and choose from a limited offering, right? It's sort of, I have 10 things to choose from, pick one, and that's just going to be it. And then I have to make this square peg fit in the round marketing hole or brand hole that I have.
Well, and a lot of those options that would come were show based from show decorators minimal book these days, right? And you don't know how to budget for that because you don't have access to that. So,
right,
being able to understand what are the costs, for a new booth, what are the costs for a rental exhibit, lower costs for a rental booth are predominantly like why we go that route. And I think some of the things we'll challenge on the topic of the conversation today is you can do a lot more. You don't have to settle, right? You don't have to settle for a rental. Like I think there are advantages and disadvantages, right? And some psychology in there, but I think fit, finish, quality, looking like a kit, having some basic, looking like everybody else, like that's all of the kind of negative connotations for sure of a rental,
no doubt,
especially from a show.
about it. And you pointed out the financial ramifications, and you did as well, Erin. With looking at this, there is a tipping point, right, where rental may not make sense, and that's sort of over the years has kind of fluctuated. We've always said, or at least I have always said, as the number of shows, 3, maybe 4 in a fiscal or in a calendar year, if in the same size booth space. That's when it would make sense to purchase, given all things being equal, right? Like if you're going to keep the same demo spaces, if you're going to keep the same brand message, if you're going to keep the same traffic flow, the personas that you're going to be engaging with, as long as you can keep those consistent, it may make sense to go ahead and purchase a display when you're just making a decision based on finances when it comes to rental. But there's a number of different reasons that you could rent. So we've covered a couple of different things for rental disadvantages. One of the things I want to go into before we get to the advantages of rental, because that's kind of where I want to finish this conversation, is we talked about the tipping point of moving to purchase, right? So there's also some purchase disadvantages as well, right? So when we talked about the limited flexibility of rental, there's a limited flexibility story around a purchase of an exhibit as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're pot vested, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've put your entire budgetary allocation into a purchase. And I mean, as a person who has bought cars and homes, I'm not quickly throwing that out to get another one. I got to get my value out of it. I've got to make
Right.
it stretch, right? But I also, just as with a car, it's going to get door dinged in the grocery store parking lot. And
Yes.
it's
Yes.
going to have a kid that wears baseball cleats dig into my leather chair, right? Things will happen to this owned property that is a big disadvantage, in my opinion, of ownership of a booth because trade show is hard. I mean, we're talking about taking a road show. Basically, we're the traveling circus, and we're going to
Yeah.
load this thing into crates. We're going to ship it on unloving trucks because that's just the freight world. And it's going to go up for 2 to 4 days and get ripped down to do it again. And so when we own those properties, every bit of wear and tear, every bit of physical deterioration is something that if we're trying to stretch it, if we're trying to get our value out of it, it's going back up that way again, or I'm having to invest dollars into refurb and repair. And so
Yeah.
that's one of the sides of ownership that I find. Besides, there's other areas, but that's the one I see the most is, when you're having to get as much life out of something you own as possible on the third, fourth, eighth run, what's that product you're putting on the floor? What's the
Yeah.
quality?
Yeah.
Right.
Is it how you
Right.
want to go to market?
And it's
Yeah.
what's new, right? Why are we going? Why would an attendee go to the show other than they get an annual trip every year to go to the big industry show? But it's to see what's new. What's new, what's going on with this company, with a
Yeah.
partner, whatever. And I love a consistent brand, but a lot of the expectations are that we're going to have, a new product launch. We're going to have a space to be able to interact in ways that are customized towards every exhibitor. I'd need to do a demo. I need to have a private conversation. I need to, do all of these things inside that booth space. And while there's safety and security in having our, pot, as you say, I feel like there's, not much flexibility, right? You feel like I gotta use this for, I don't know what, 4 or 5 years. And,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
start to look a little bit haggard.
No doubt about it. And it's funny you brought up the new product thing. I was just reading Exhibitor Magazine just published some new statistics, and over 85% of attendees go to shows to see new stuff, to take a look at new products. So when you think about, I'm just rolling the same thing out there, yes, you may do some new graphics, you may refresh, may reinvest a little bit of money in kind of making some things brand new or adding some new color or splashing or doing some things like that. But the core of what you're rolling out there on a purchased exhibit is going to be pretty much the same. Is that going to be what you need it to be in terms of attracting, new attendees? And you also have to think about, in 5 years, has your buyer persona changed? Are they the same people? Are they attracted to the same thing? Has the technology grown or become different? Does it work well with what you own? Those are things to think about.
As you were saying that, Brian, I was thinking the persona on the other side. Like, what's the persona of the company that just wants to get to the show, just wants to keep up with the Joneses? There's the innovator. We always want to look like a leader in our market, So there's like a whole bunch of psychology around that tied in with sales and marketing and all of those spends too.
No doubt about it. Okay. So going back to some of the disadvantages of purchase as compared to rental is just operational costs, right? It's like rental, and I have a ton of clients who are always like, they just kind of walk away at the end. I own a couple graphics, but otherwise, do whatever you want with it. It's not mine. Like the kind of the way we treat rental cars when we drop them back off at the airport. Come sliding in sideways, check the keys to the guy, and we're out of here. You talk about like crating costs, storage fees. Erin, you mentioned wear and tear, right? Like, what does that thing look like at show 8? You're almost afraid to ask. right?
Yeah.
Given the trucking, the wear and tear, the up and the down. I mean, these things are built to withstand most of those things, but we all know the trade show floor is a rugged environment, right?
Well,
And
and
there's
the invisible costs. I talk to clients a lot about the invisible costs of purchase. There's value in both purchase and rental. It's all about your program and what you're trying to accomplish and your budget, all of those things. Of course, there is. But every trade show exhibitor has to learn what the invisible costs are, the ones that your attendee won't see, right? They'll see that graphic, they'll see that monitor, that video wall, they'll even see that piece of rental furniture that you try to have a meeting at, but they won't see what you spent in storage. And they won't see what you spent in refurb and repair. They won't see those things. So I always find that the exhibitors need to be very conscientious of not just what my spend now is. Yes, this is my current operating budget for this year's program. Okay, if I'm buying next year, what does that look like? Where am I spending my dollars next year where my attendee won't even see it? And I think that that's part of the story with, rental versus purchase. To your point, a rental client's like, not my problem. Show's over. It's yours now. And those operational costs, those silent, invisible costs, some of those shift back to the company that rents you the booth. And I think it's a way to stretch your budget dollar for those things that don't actually become tangible on the show floor.
No doubt about it. Like, where do you want to invest your money? Are you investing it directly into the attendee experience, where the dollar goes directly into something that could generate revenue, or into the upkeep of an asset or a capital expense, right? That's where it comes into. You better really love the booth you've designed this year come 2031.
Stretch
it because you're going to have those last years that last year you're going to be using it, because we always say, like, it's a 3 to 5 year window, right? In how long you're going to keep a purchased exhibit or a customized exhibit that you're going to be making your own. So yeah, you're making great points, both of you. Another thing,
the bean counters. I was just gonna say, they're gonna manage your capex, right? Yeah, if you're buying stuff, that's gonna be a big challenge.
There's a depreciation schedule that comes along with that too, right? Yeah, so you're going to get some tax breaks on, it's just not worth as much anymore. So there is some give back on that. Whereas rental, it's just you're writing a check and it's gone. So again, I love the conversation. There's a little bit for, a little bit against. One of the things is specifically when, and we start to look at it from the client side now, when you look at it from purchase versus rental, and you look at, I'll use Skyline as an example from like a service center strategy, and being able to utilize rental assets from a regional standpoint, is being able to pull rental assets and localize freight. Whereas if I own an exhibit and I have to keep it in Vegas, and let's just say we know shows swing year to year, and let's say my shows are swinging up and down the East Coast the year after I buy the exhibit, and everything's stored in Vegas. Well, my regionalized freight just became exorbitantly more expensive. So, and maybe, and not just with Skyline, but just with any exhibit house, if they have one location or two locations, I get to keep, or I have to keep my own exhibit in one of those two locations and work freight around there. So it's a little, you have to look at a lot of factors. It's not just a matter of, oh, do I want to buy this? Do I want to own it? I was in a meeting not too long ago where the person who was going through the discovery, they had only owned exhibits. And I was kind of shocked. They had, renting an exhibit specifically around, it was a large exhibit space. It was over 2,500 square feet. And she had given no thought to rental. And they only use this size exhibit space one time a year.
For sure.
But they had only been like growing up. That's it. In the industry, we had to own it. Why wouldn't we?
How many of you have worked with people that we own stuff?
We just own it. We own it. That's one of my favorite client stories, when we got involved with planning for this particular client, it happens to be ECI software. You hear software, you don't think home, but they do a lot for like building and things of that nature. And they had a, keystone event that they were coming to us to talk about. And they were coming in thinking to have such an interesting and unique build space, we're going to have to buy it. That was their first thought. And they just walked right in with that plan. And I remember the first question, that we had that really opened the conversation was, let's not talk about your keystone event alone. What's your program? Like, what's your whole program? And once we dug into it, they had pretty much decided they were going to buy for the big Super Bowl of their events and treat their smaller and more regional events as kind of like just throwaway presents. And we're like, you don't have to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a really fun conversation about talking about how we can utilize rental to make this a wow experience for your big event and build on some custom elements that are repurposable into different booth spaces for your smaller events. You have consistent branding, you have reconfigurability, and we stretch your budget. And in their brains, to look unique, to have this unique concept on the show floor, we're going to have to purchase it. And that was one of the ones that it really sticks out for me as a client, that we went in and it was a one path to purchase, and there was so much benefit in rental that it was a great fit for them. 5 years later, we're still having a great time doing great shows and every manner of booth size, and they didn't have to sacrifice their smaller events just to allocate the money to the big one. And I think that that's a big part of the rental story for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
I was just going to say, like, having a core, right? Like you have to be able to, you flip their script on them. So instead of like owning the big one and then like trying to figure it out, own a core, a core asset profile and rent up to the big stuff, right? Like that's where you get all the customization, and that's where they want to have all the, the variability, like we talked about before, like, hey, what's new and how do I really focus on a theme, right, for the year, right? Like that's the way to do it.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's one of my favorite things about the industry is being able to have strategic conversations around people's programs, because they're always different. People always approach them different ways. They have different objectives, different KPIs, right? They go to different size shows. They have different agendas, different business units trying to be approached or trying to audiences. Yeah, it's always such an interesting mix. That it's never the same thing twice, right? And it's constantly changing. So those are my favorite types of conversations too, Erin, is when you can get someone in and you can kind of change their perspective on, like, I need to go this route, and you're like, do you? Let's talk that out, right? Like let's figure it out. Okay, so we covered some purchase disadvantages. We covered some rental disadvantages. There are some advantages to owning an exhibit, right? And I have a couple of them. One is brand consistency, right? So there is some truth to when someone walks on the show floor, they can look and they recognize that booth and they go, yes, I feel very comfortable. I recognize that brand. I can go and I know exactly how to operate within that. And that goes not just for the attendee, but that also goes for the staff, right? Like training staff and getting staff comfortable with how to work inside a booth space, the demos and what happens in there, the attendee journey within that space, and doing it, consistently and fluidly. Not always the easiest thing, right? And it's probably what counts the most when it comes to exhibiting. Like if your staff isn't well trained or doesn't know how to operate or work inside the booth space, that's going to negatively affect you. So that is definitely one upside to owning an exhibit. I would say for a trade show organizer inside a company is not having to go through a redesign every year.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I've heard that a ton too, right? Like, boy, if I don't have to go through a redesign and a rediscovery, and it's not the discovery process, like it's the up and the down and the approvals.
Internal approvals. For sure.
It's always the if I can avoid some red tape for a year or two in getting approvals and budget approves and all of the things that go along with all of that and this initial spend, that would be amazing, right?
I don't know that the emotional, like the emotional bullet point was ever on my consideration set of owning a booth. Like less emotional damage.
Yes. I can just stop thinking about it for a little while.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
you get everything you want, in a purchase. Like you get whatever you want, exactly how you want it.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
And we talked about programs, right? So I mean, not every program's got a different outlook. And, you mentioned it earlier, Brian, if it's a program where you're doing the exact same booth space and your audience is fairly, consistent, so minor graphicking or messaging changes without structure or flow changes is useful, and you're going to do 3 shows, 4 shows a year, okay, it might make sense to own it, right? That might make sense. Yeah. And so it's not off the table by any means. It's a holistic view of how you are handling your program.
There definitely, there's definitely some pros to owning it. It's just, well, I think part of this conversation is to go through and kind of uncover or pick up all the rocks and kind of look at it and go, hey, here's some of the things you should be looking out for if you were to be purchasing, if you were to be renting. We look at the customization thing has come up too, right? When we look at it, and that was a stigma as far as the rental is concerned. Like, but I need my demo station to look like this and look unlike anyone else's. Right? Or I need this booth to have a 30-degree curve.
The form, the shape, the color. It has to be a custom Pantone, color of paint. Yeah.
Exactly. So the customization, the consistency, the recognizable factor, the program consistency. If I know things aren't going to change and we're just going to go full steam ahead for 4 or 5 shows a year for the next 2-3 years, and it's going to be operating the same. And again, we as consultants, right, back in our day, kind of go through the same thing as like we have ways of working through. You can purchase and work through tiering your graphics. Right. So that you don't have to worrying about, changing things out show to show, and that eye level graphics become either something smaller or digital so that show to show, audience to audience, or as things become refreshed or new product launches happen, those are things that can actually be swapped out or change. Or even with the modularity of like a Skyline product, you can add or subtract or move things around even with a purchased exhibit. So there are some things, and being able to amortize that cost over a certain amount of time as well. If I'm going to take a loan out to buy this thing or lease it, you have the opportunity to do that as well. So there are definitely purchase advantages. But now we get into kind of where I wanted to go, kind of with the whole point of this conversation, and then we're gonna kind of get to the cherry on top, which is kind of a smash together of both, is some of the rental advantages, right? So what are a couple that you guys can think of off the top of your guys' head?
Just being able to, from the financial perspective for me.
Yeah, the stretch.
Just to be able to stretch it. We talked before about the costs of owning an exhibit, and doing refurbs and having all of these ancillary costs for storage. But freeing up, I think the theme, right, of rental for me is how can I streamline my budget, but then also allocate a new budget to do something cool. Like, I got my core structure all set. How can I use my budget to add in some digital? How do I get some more interactive pieces, add a thematic layer to that? I think it allows you to kind of explore some of those things a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. Erin?
Yeah, stretching the budget is always the very first thing that comes to mind for me. But I still always go back to the variability. You're not stuck. If if the flow wasn't how you intended because the audience didn't function as you expected around your messaging, you're not stuck. You make a change. You have room to pivot because you're not, again, pot committed on that purchase. So I think that's a huge part of it. Also, in the example I was giving earlier, it's actually quite rare that companies that go to multiple trade shows in a year, that they're only in one size booth space or the exact same spot on the floor. This show, I'm at the back of the hall. This show, I'm at the front of the hall. This show, I got a giant pillar sticking through the middle of my booth, right? I mean, these are real things that we deal with, besides just saying I have a 10 by 20, then I have a 20 by 20, now I'm in a 30 by 40, right? And so when I own, I can't consider every possible scenario I might run into over a period of 3 to 5 years of my exhibiting. So I get to really be a little bit more intentional by event. I can look at, reconfigurability and what we would do in the smaller booth space versus this large one, so we can plan ahead. But that pillar in the middle of my booth doesn't necessarily wreck everything. I don't have to move to the back of the show hall. I can plan around this to be closer to the entrance, because I rent, and my team will walk through options of how we go to market in that space, right? And so that's one of the big ones for me, is that it just gives you more flexibility to go to show how you want to be seen.
Yeah, and we're biased. We're biased too, because we're talking about custom modular, right? In Skyline's world, we can be modular, and that's the way to go. But I think, all your points are valid too, right? But we talked about operational costs, right? I don't have storage. I don't have refurbs. I love all of those aspects of it. But as you were talking, Erin, I was thinking, wow, I could try a show, right? Like I could be like, hey, we've never, exhibited in this market, or we're trying to break into a new market or something like that. And now I don't have to spend a huge ton of money buying a whole nother asset. Maybe your shows are conflicting. I don't know, but it's a way to kind of try something out. So I like that for rental too.
For me, it's marketing is not an exact science, right? So I can sit down, go through a full discovery with a seasoned marketing team that goes, we're going to do this and it's going to be great, and we're going to design it this way and it's going to be custom, and it's good. This is how the staff's going to operate, and we're going to build it and adjust to their specs and exactly how they want it, and we're going to plan it on the show floor, and and it doesn't work the way they wanted it to work.
Yeah.
Because the audience just isn't feeling it, right? The audience walks by and they're like, it just doesn't hit. It's not hitting with the personas. It's maybe, the buyers have changed a little bit since the last time the marketers rolled something out. Who knows? There's a number of different ways that sometimes, marketing falls flat. But to be able to be nimble and flexible and go, okay, well, we can move on from that and try something new, as opposed to, we just invested all this money in this thing, and now we didn't get what we wanted out of it at this first show. Well, see you in 2031 when we're going to be back to try to do something again.
Pivot is not part of the custom.
That's right.
Purchase.
That's right.
Nomenclature. You don't pivot.
Yeah.
No pivot.
I love what you said about being able to do or tap into maybe different markets, right? Other shows that I wasn't going to go to, and try different things. I've also seen, and this has come up a lot over the last 2 to 3 years, specifically after COVID, when shows came roaring back. I felt like they were just all vying for the same weekends in different cities. Is the crossover, right? Is like being able to rent exhibits and that look the same or are exactly the same in different cities was extremely important to a lot of the companies that we were dealing with. So even if you did own an exhibit, you having the ability to rent something anyway that looks like what you owned was extremely important to some of our clients. simply because we have two major shows that are taking place within 1 or 2 days of each other on different coasts.
Yeah.
How do we manage that? We can't just not go to one. They're, the ROI we get out of both of them is extremely high. We have to make sure we have good face at both.
Yep.
So that becomes a huge factor, or at least has been as of late.
Regional assets, regional rental inventories at service centers, right? Like that's kind of one of what we lean on at Skyline. So you could own a booth that's in Vegas. You have 2 days to get to the next one. Maybe you rent that Orlando show and you don't have to have $30,000 in freight to get it there.
Dedicated hot shot across the country almost is the cost of renting a repeat exhibit on the other coast.
Right.
That's true.
And less stress, like, is it going to make it kind of thing. Right. So, and when it was dismantled in that prior city, did everything get out in time? And, there's all those challenges. So, I do think that, kind of one last thing on the rental thing is I personally find it to be less stressful, because when something in this industry, if it can go wrong, it'll go wrong. It just does. There's just too many moving parts and variables. Again, traveling circus, right? Yeah. But if we are moving properties and something's left on the show floor, or God forbid, the show labor drives a forklift through the side of your crate, which I have physically seen personally on the floor. Yeah. Most of us have, right?
Yep. Yeah.
It's not like, oh my gosh, my booth is destroyed. I have to replace, I have to solve, I have to find. When you rent, I know that we deal with it regularly. When that stuff goes wrong, that went wrong. Yeah. And we fix it, because that's our properties that you are going to market with. So we have backups on hand. We have replacement parts in our service centers around the country. When it's your property, it's a very different conversation about chasing insurance claims. And do we have the budget to replace it now in the next 6 hours before show opens? Mm-hmm. But when it's the exhibit house's property, we have reserves and we are very quick to respond. So I find that helps mitigate some of the stress.
That's a great point. And doubling back to some of the things like purchase, when you talk to some of the hidden costs, right? The stuff that you don't have there's no storage fees. You don't have to own any of the crating that sometimes gets holes in them with the forklifts, the maintenance costs, right? So you're able to deploy those funds directly into things that would drive revenue on the show floor. Mm-hmm. Or as much as like what Roger was saying, I get to deploy those into maybe new tech that could be, tech integration on the show floor that drives engagement inside my exhibit. I get to try new things that maybe go inside my exhibit or work well into the attendee journey in the booth, and go, well, that didn't work, or that did work, and then I double down next show. Or that didn't work, well, it's no big deal. I rented that for this show. I don't own it. I don't have to hold on to it for the next 5 years. All right, we're not going to do that. We measure it, see what worked, move on, double down on what did, and try something else. I think that's the flexibility in a number of different ways is what really, for me and probably for a lot of folks, is what entices people to the rental side, is not having to be locked in, and also the ability to design to scale, the ability to be able to go, well, I'm in a 20 by 20, or I'm going to go up at this show. I'm going to make a bigger splash, right? I'm rolling out a new product, and I'm not always going to be in this 30 by 30. But I really want to step up with the bigger companies this time around. I really want to make my presence felt, because this new thing that I'm rolling out is a disruptor in the industry, or whatever it is. So I want to have the ability to do this. I don't want to spend and buy all the assets that it's going to take to fill up this footprint. I just don't. But I want to be able to look like I belong in this footprint. And
make it easy to elevate. Yeah.
Yes, it gives you the opportunity to elevate, for sure. And then as we get into probably, which is where I would say most of our exhibitry falls in the Skyline world, is the combination of.
Yes, it's my favorite.
It's my favorite as well, because it gives you the best of both worlds. It's the hybrid exhibit. It allows you to take and I think the percentages we normally work on is 75-25, 70-30, right? Rental to customized. So you got the Pantone color, you got I need the counter to look like this and not like anything else in the demo space, and have all the cool lighting effects and the built-in LED walls and that sort of stuff. But when it comes to the conference room, I don't need to own the conference room, right? Because that's going to flex and switch. So when it comes to the hybrid exhibit, I think that's where Skyline really shines. The combination of the modular exhibit systems and the custom wood shop, the custom metal shop, whether that's through the hanging signage or the lighting effects that we were talking about. Those are the kind of things that really allow you to stand out. I use, and I'm going to use an example, Sierra Pacific, right? Just won an award for that booth. They came to us and they wanted to create a hybrid exhibit, mainly because they create windows, right? They have their own product, and they're
need to showcase their product.
Yeah, we have to showcase our product. So the custom part of what they were doing was, here, figure out a way to integrate our product with a custom solution, and putting it in with the rest of your lightweight systems, because we don't want to create this huge, heavy, exhibit that's going to have to be lugged around for, the next 3-4 years, but also be able to be flexible, because we're not always in the same size booth space. And I think that's where we get into all of the things we talked about. You get all of the advantages of the rental, which is the flexibility, the regionalized freight or the regionalized solutions. You get to pull some assets from the service centers, the customized look and feel.
You can bring your wish list. You can still have a wish list.
Yeah, you get your wouldn't it be great ifs. Yeah. Right? Those are my favorite. Tell me what your wouldn't it be great ifs are, and we can make those happen while still having the ability to stretch your marketing dollars. And I've found, and I don't know about you guys, but a lot of the clients that I meet with now really fall into that category.
Yeah, it's become really, for our client partner base, it really has become our sweet spot, if you will. Because again, back to the joy of rental, lower operational costs, stretching your budget dollars, reconfigurability, not being stuck, right? But when they stretch those budget dollars, a lot of times it's for these wow moments. It's these really great, backlit logos that just are eye-catching, or it's demo stations that are very brand specific, and, some areas like that just add to the parts and pieces that we have, limited your spend on through rental, allows you to push the envelope a bit more and get those wow moments and those custom, really brand centric pieces. And I mean, we're seeing more and more of it. It's so far away from kit. Far away. Yeah. It's really very fun to have those conversations, to be like, well, if you don't spend it over here, you can look like this. And they're like, oh, okay. That changes the conversation, right?
Well, for me, the fun part is you can start looking at, we talked earlier about looking at multi-year, right? So, hey, this year in a hybrid approach, I can have some of those custom things. I'm going to get in there on the first show to buy all that stuff, and I have my cool hybrid approach. Well, now you can create a roadmap. What I always say, like, okay, this year I'm going to go in with basic, logos. next year I'm going to backlight those logos, and I'm going to, really invest in all the little touch points, right?
Yes.
That elevate the look. Now I know how I have a roadmap for how to spend my recurring budgets, when I start having that approach, right? So that's a really fun conversation to be in with clients too. They get their wish list.
No doubt about it. And it's great. I mean, being in the industry as long as we have, we love to look program based, right? It's a living and breathing thing. You may not be doing it on the first go round, but let's make a plan so that what could this look like 3 shows in, 5 shows in, right? As we start to get the metrics back on everything that we're doing and looking at it and what's working, what's not, what needs to be tweaked. How do we adjust for that? And how do we create new experiences inside the booth and keep adding on and get it looking refreshed, newer, maybe a little bit of reconfiguration? That's the kind of thing that marketers look to us as industry professionals for guidance, right? They have an idea of what the booth needs to accomplish, but they come to us, and I hear it all the time. You guys are the experts. You tell us, like, you're the experts.
Mm-hmm.
And that nothing I love more than that, to go, yeah, just put yourself in our hands. Like, we will take you on through the experience. Like, we will put you on a path to success. It's actually really cool. It's one of my favorite things about the industry, honestly, is that being able to not only form the relationships with these marketers, but also to see how where you start in a program to where you actually end up could be light years away in the growth of the program.
Yeah,
for sure. I think, Roger touched on brand consistency earlier. It's come up a few different times, and, talking about kind of that hybrid rental with some custom and owned asset model. I really love where you can elevate your booth through brand consistency as well. You create these cornerstone assets. I've got these really cool backlit logos that are spot on to my brand. And I have these 3 custom demo stations. When I go to my 10 by 20, I only take one of them. Yep. But it looks on brand with when I go to my 20 by 30 and I set up all 3. And it's scalable, but it's still interesting and unique. And so you take that rental and you add those custom cornerstone pieces that you have, and you can keep your brand consistency while being, stretching that dollar and still being, a standout on the floor.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I also love, and we touched on it before, when it comes to the combination of the hybrid, is also owning a section of your booth, right? When we start to look at programs, and how many times in our careers have we done this, when we look at a show program and they go, well, we go to 15 shows a year, and you look at the program and you go, yeah, all right, you go to 13 inlines and you go to 2 islands. Okay, let me tell you, you don't want to own your island stuff. Like, let's work on this. And quite frankly, half of the inlines you're going to, let's talk about the weight of going to those shows. How invested are you in those shows? Are they, pop-up setup, banners, that sort of stuff? They need to be structural? What happens at those shows? And owning those, and then renting up, keeping core consistency, and then utilizing and stretching those dollars. And when you can take those conversations and take the budget when they say, I have this amount to spend, and they've been kind of just throwing money at these larger shows, and you can reframe the way they think about how they go to market or how they spend those marketing dollars, it really changes how they view not only trade shows, but trade show consultants or in general, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're like, why have I not known this before? And I can't answer that. Maybe you just haven't worked with us, but
that's generally their answer.
Yeah, that's my general answer. One of my favorite stories is Walgreens. Walgreens used to be a client of mine, and they came in, and they were a purchase of an exhibit. And when I first sat down with them, it was just for HR. and they had about $200,000 to spend on a 40 by 70 exhibit that they were going to use one time a year. And they had CapEx money. They needed to spend it. I couldn't convince them to rent. No chance. And I said, okay, all right. You can only see, you get 3 no's and then you stop asking the question. Yeah. But I got a couple other business units into the conversation, and then it turned into that HR business unit renting that booth that they owned to the other business units. That 40 by 70 was then designed to break down to 4 or 5, 6 different configurations of 10 by 10s, 10 by 20s, 20 by 20s, 20 by 30s, just out of what they own, because we went in and designed it as a program. But then when they went to larger shows, larger than their 40 by 70s, they did some 100 by 120s. They actually were able to rent components up. So it was like the perfect example of a hybrid sample of they owned what they needed as a core, were able to utilize it for different business units as rental opportunities, new graphics. But then also when they came time to rent or go to larger exhibits, they didn't have to go and reinvest those dollars. They actually just came in and rented up for those things because, and this may be just a Skyline thing, I don't know, having not been invested in any other companies. Skyline rents exactly the same components that we sell. So that is another thing when kind of one of the stigmas, I guess, when it comes to rental is that I don't get the same product lines, right? Is I can buy, and I guess that comes with like rental cars too, is like, oh, I can go buy this cool rental car and then I go to rent something and I'm still renting the Metro. And I'm like, what? The Geo Metro? Like, do they still make that? I don't think they do. Not in this country anyway. Yeah. So that's also a benefit, I guess, when it comes to that, is that if you were to own something in terms of a hybrid example, from a Skyline perspective, and wanted to rent up or add on, you have the ability to add on utilizing the same components that you purchased, which is again, when you start looking at it, when you start looking at life of your program, life of your exhibit, one of the benefits that you have with us. So,
well, the brand consistency is one thing, right? But we're talking about a cohesive experience, right?
Yeah, not like Frankensteining your booth.
Well, you were talking, as you were talking, I'm like, the analogy is more like an add-on to your house, right?
Yes.
My house is like I have stucco. I'm going to add on a wing to it, and now I have wood siding on it. You're like, hey,
right.
It doesn't matter.
You don't want it to look out of place. You have to have brand consistency. That's a great example. And you've seen those driving around neighborhoods where you're like, ooh,
that was added.
That's
added.
That's new.
That's new-ish.
That's new.
That was added in a different era.
But I think everything that we're talking about with a hybrid, we started this whole conversation with, that's a rental. You're right. Like you get the kit rental. I mean, you're able to stand out at a show, elevate in certain ways, provide more areas of interaction and engagement within the booth space, and still look like a custom booth with a hybrid option. That's what I like about it.
That's a great.
It kind of level sets. Right?
Yeah, that's a great way to bring it back 360, Roger. And I think that's where we're going to kind of wrap up the conversation today. Erin, Roger, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This has been an amazing conversation. I look forward to seeing you both in person again real soon, not just in a little box. This has been the second edition of Beyond the Booth. Thank you so much for joining. You can find us on the Skyline website, as well as on our YouTube channel, Spotify, anywhere else that you find your podcast content. Also, stay on the lookout. We're going to have some cool stuff coming to you live from Exhibitor Live, the show, the trade show about trade shows. Yes. I bet you didn't know that even existed. The trade show about trade shows coming up the end of the month. We're going to be doing some recording there and bringing you some snippets and some really cool stuff from there. So be on the lookout for that. So thank you again, everybody. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Brian.
Thanks, y'all.